part of it is really just getting the word out, right? Because about every 6 months, somebody will retweet that post that says like, okay, hear me out, Tinder, but for tabletop role-playing games. And people know me well enough that they tag me in it. And I'm like, yeah, guess what? It exists.
Welcome to the Red Caps Podcast, a podcast where we dip our caps into the blood of our listeners and we ramble on about old school games. In today's episode, I'm going to be sitting down with Joaquin from RPGMatch and RPG.net, and we're going to be talking about the eHarmony or Tinder of tabletop role-playing games. We're going to be talking about how the partnership between RPGMatch merged into RPG.net. We'll be talking about a lot of really cool metrics that he's been able to gather as he's put together the site and looked at the usage. We'll talk about some of the future plans they have and some of the features that might be coming up that would probably be very useful to those who are trying to find a game online or in person. So, without any other preamble, let's throw it over to the interview, and I hope, as always, that you can sit back, listen, and enjoy.
Hi, folks. I'm joined by Joaquin, and we are going to talk about a little site that's going to help you get in and find other people to play RPGs with. Say hello and tell us about RPGMatch.
Hello. Hello to everybody. And RPGMatch is a matchmaking service for tabletop games. So I can get into the origin story of RPGMatch, but we're also part of RPGNet, which is a long-time forum and website that's been around since 1996. So we're taking the new, we're taking the old, and we're mashing it all together and making it purple.
When I first saw it, I was like, this is like the eHarmony or Tinder of tabletop RPG table finding. You can go in, you set up your profile, give your preferences, and you get a match coming back. So this started back in what, like 2020 or 2022?
Coming so it was 2022. So it was so my origin story in tabletop games is I found the first edition monster manual for Dungeons and Dragons when I was in preschool. And I thought that was fascinating. I couldn't even process all of that stuff, but I was looking at the trolls and the owlbear and all of those things. And then, much later in third grade, I ended up having a teacher who had a copy of the red box. And so it was the little dice that where you would sort of use a crayon to fill in the numbers and things like that. But I was off to the races. I played all the way through elementary school, junior high, high school, college. And then I got married and I had kids pretty early. And as soon as I could no longer rock my baby girl to sleep while rolling dice, my wife was like, "You're done." So took about 15 years off and ended up getting back into it like many people. I think I'm a bit of a trope during the pandemic. So I was watching my kids and they were stuck on the computer all day. And I was like, you know what, I need to get you off of that. And so I looked up D&D. I sort of skipped 4th edition. I had sort of stopped around 3rd and then found 5th edition, got involved, listened to some actual play podcasts and all of that. And it was great. I ran a game for my kids, and then I ran a game for my son and his, at the time, 12-year-old friends. It was fun. Actually, it was a great table. But then I thought, I'd love to play with some adults. And so I was like, I'm sure the internet has created an app by now that I can just go on, say what I like, say what I don't like, and it matches me with the perfect tabletop. Turned out it hadn't. So in my day job, I'm involved in the software trade. And so I thought, okay, well, that's me, I guess. And so then I said, okay, I'll just create this app and ask the perfect questions. And that's actually what got started me on TTRPG Twitter, because I was like, what are the questions? And there's a ton of questions you can ask. Some of them aren't really good for forming a table. Some of them are critical. But that's the origin story for RPGMatch.
And for the nerdy ones of us, so I'm also in the IT industry. What's it written in? How long did it take you to go through? It's like what is running? What's the powering this?
Okay, it's Okay, so on the back end, I'll tell you about RPGNet too, because I'm sure people will want to know which version of PHP it's running on. It's all custom code.
I can't believe that's still what's running that site, but yeah.
Yeah, there, and the forum software is different. So, but for RPGMatch itself, it is AWS microservices, including a whole bunch of things like Cognito and Lambdas and all of that stuff. There is some machine learning in the back end in terms of matchmaking, and so we've got a couple different data stores. And then on the front end, it's React.js, but we're moving over to Next.js in terms of what the front end looks like. So. Well, a little sidebar there.
So when you set this up originally, before you managed to come into this partnership with RPGNet, and it was a standalone thing. Was it something that you were looking at going, because it's got to be difficult to figure out how to monetize that or fund it long term? I mean, I guess now with the partnership with RPGNet, that probably is less of a concern than it was prior. But how? When you're looking at that and you're architecting out something like that, you mentioned you're using Lambda and AWS. So I'm assuming the cost at that point becomes fairly low and maintainable.
Lower.
Yeah, lower. But
yeah, I wish they were lower. Fortunately, my day job provides me with some capital that I've been able to invest in this, and actually we have outside investors, so we are I suppose seed round funded. The whole concept really is about creating a place for people to match, creating also an ecosystem that I'm hoping will just be able to displace tabletop role-playing Twitter, because every time a billionaire does something silly, then do we really need to scatter to the wind and go to all of these different places? Or wouldn't it be nice if we have a centralized community where, yes, matching is part of it, but the bigger picture of bringing in RPGNet really is about creating that centralized community and a place for you to be you. You can say, these are the games I like to play. These are the things that I'm doing. These are the forum posts that I want to talk about. And so that's the vision. From a cost standpoint, it really is my day job sort of funding that from both a labor standpoint and also from a cost standpoint. And while I would love to say that RPGNet is wildly profitable, like most things in the industry, it's not. So we're in the process of building up, an advertising arm there, but we're still, just breaking even. So it's really for the love of it. There are a fair amount of costs, but I believe that long term, probably about 5% of people will pay $20 a year for some sort of a premium account. We'll figure out what that will be on the other side. If we have 10 million users, then that's plenty of revenue to do all sorts of things.
So when you're kicking this off, same as any sort of a social media platform, like you said, if everybody evacuates from one, how do they all know where to go? Because there ends up being a whole bunch. And the problem with, I feel, in current social media is that they suffer from having the critical mass. People won't change because all their friends are on this other one. So what's been the hardest thing about getting people to sign up for RPGMatch? Because it is something that's new. I mean, it's definitely has a value proposition, but what's the hardest thing to actually get people to engage on it?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is really just getting the word out, right? Because about every 6 months, somebody will retweet that post that says like, okay, hear me out, Tinder, but for tabletop role-playing games. And then people know me well enough that they tag me in it, and I'm like, yeah, guess what? It exists. But there's the regular sort of like, oh, what could we call it? And there's all sorts of funny names. I'm like, I called it RPGMatch, and I built it, but it was this really interesting experience last year being at Gen Con. And this year again, we don't have a booth, and so it's totally guerrilla, awareness. And I had this backpack full of these flyers that it said, don't roll the dice with who you play with. That's sort of the tagline. And I had all these things, and they had these QR codes on them. People could just scan it, and it's free, right? So there's no cost to anybody. And I'm looking at these like tens of thousands of people just walking by, and I'm like, how do I even start up a conversation about it. So that is exactly it. It's at a certain point, it was the empty bar problem. That is, nobody wants to go to a bar where there's nobody. Now we're over 10,000 users on RPGMatch. It's I think 10,500 or something like that. We had probably around 10 to 15 people a day. So the word is getting out there. Part of that is we're plugging into the banner ad system that is on RPGNet, and so that's also was one of the reasons. There's 3 million page views on RPGNet per month, and so that's a huge opportunity to get the word out. But that's it. It's getting the word out, and then it also has been. My initial thesis, like you said, sort of like a dating site, right? Where you're like, you just need one more person for your table. But it turns out that tabletop role-playing folks are actually shy. So it's funny because, I've talked to people. I'm like, hey, have you found people? They're like, well, I don't want to bother anybody. I'm just not sure if they're interested in playing the game. I'm like, literally everybody on this site, like you've got over 10,000 people who are like, yeah, I want to play. But what they really have asked for is a couple things, customized avatars that just came out. Customized bios that just came out. We've been really slow with that because we wanted to be sure it wasn't a spam magnet, where people were, just posting the link for, I don't know, their sock sale or pyramid scheme or whatever.
Right.
But then the other thing that's coming out and actually turns out to be way more complex than you might think it is on first blush is groups or games. So it's the whole looking for game, looking for group. We've biased towards the concept of looking for group. And there is a game system that every group plays. They can change it, right? But it's like the time and what's the game system and what's the platform you're going to play it on. So that's coming out actually, I think next week or the week after. And I'm super excited about that because that is the feature that everybody's been waiting for. And what makes it very different from some of the other places you can go, like whether it's Denny playing or Start Playing or Roll20. One, it looks cooler, so it looks really nice. But the other thing is you can actually see the people, right? Which otherwise it's just the GM and they're describing the game. But this you can actually say, oh, these are the people who are seated at the table, and it's such an expensive process. I don't mean like expensive cash, but like finding a gaming group is painful and and scary, and you have to like reveal yourself to strangers, right?
So when you launch this and somebody's going through and they're trying to find that group on the site, what's the sort of information that you think is important for the group, for somebody to find a group versus trying to find an individual? So your current setup has a lot of ways to match against an individual for certain preferences. Are you using the exact same items for the group, or is there a different set of metrics that a group should be putting down for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, so the initial thought, and we've sort of backtracked a little bit in terms of how much filtering we were doing on like game preferences, and there's a couple reasons for that, but one of them is simply the most important one is people just want to play the game. And so before any sort of like how good of a match is it, there's a logistical challenge of who's available to play the game that I want on the platform that I want, that is available at the time that I want. And so we have the availability match, which is a really important piece. And so the match score, which we thought would be a much more important piece, and I still do have huge hopes and dreams for that because I want to find my tabletop role-playing soulmates, right? I want somebody who's like 100% match on like role-playing versus combat versus, and they hate puzzles just like me, like whatever those things are. I think that that's really exciting as we build that base and as people can get more picky. But what I realized is this was described by somebody. They were like, I live in a nerd poor environment, and they're sort of like in the middle of the country, in the middle of the US. They're like, we don't have a gaming shop. We don't have, any nexus for this stuff. So I realized I needed to focus on helping the nerd poor. And so it's just, baseline, like when's your availability and what do you want to play? And what's the platform you want to play on? I think there's another really important question to avoid some real world conflicts. And this is a proxy question. So it's less about the stylistic preferences, but if you ask somebody, how do you feel about safety tools? Right? That's a really good proxy for I vote Democrat or I vote Republican in the United States. And
I don't know if I agree. I'm in Canada, so I don't vote for either. But like, if you went and looked on there, and you were to take that same logic and apply it to possibly my profile, I think you'd have a very different flip on it. But I get where you're coming from on it. I just don't think I would put that as a. I'd be careful on that one. I think a little bit because I don't think that applies. But
whether it's a proxy for political party is sort of, it's actually less relevant because it's not really about political party in terms of the split in the diaspora. It's like it's the new school versus the old school, right? And so the old school is absolutely like, hey, don't be a flower, and I'm going to kill your character and all of that. And they disdain from safety tools as some sort of modern edifice that didn't need it.
Oh, I think I just lost your audio just for a moment.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think I just lost your audio though, if you don't mind.
Oh,
doing a quick check.
Maybe it was.
No, you. Oh,
can you check 1, 2?
You're fading in and out a little bit.
Okay,
there, got you now. Yep.
So I just turned the video off. Hopefully that will be a little bit better. But
sure.
For the old school, did you hear me on that part?
I heard you right when you started going old school. That's when your microphone started fading in and out. So we probably missed most of that point.
Yeah. Okay. So the people who are anti-safety tools are really oftentimes people who are like, hey, I didn't have safety tools growing up. I don't even want to know what safety tools are. I think it's silly and it's a modern edifice, and I don't want to engage in that conversation. Now, those same people may actually say like, well, all I do is I hang out with the people at the table and just make sure that they're going to be okay with whatever themes are going to be being brought up. And so I'm like, okay, well, those are safety tools. But if that's your stance on safety tools, that's your stance on safety tools. Then you have the other people who are can be militant about safety tools, and they have a whole process that they want to go through, and everybody should have an X card at the table. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right?
No, I think everybody should run the table how they wish.
You just don't want to seat those same people at the table. There's no reason to jump into a holy war on safety tools before you actually engage. Or it's a meta conversation, right? And so you should at least have a common language in terms of the meta conversation at the table. And it turns out the majority of people are like, I keep lines of communication open. Right. And that's how most people land. There's also a surprising number of people, at least for me, because I'm so enmeshed in the meta conversation, that are like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, well, I think once you step away from, like, people conflate what the tabletop scene is by what they see on Twitter and Reddit. Yeah. And if I don't have any marketing numbers to go and back this up, but real world experience has told me that while Reddit and Twitter are very loud and very opinionated, they represent very few of the actual like greater players of any game, whether that be a tabletop game or a board game or a sports team for that matter. The people that get involved on a social media platform are not necessarily representative. So it's very, very common, I would assume, for the vast majority. If you went to a convention, or if you went to, dropped yourself down into a random town in whatever city and went to their local game store and said, hey, what do you guys use for safety tools? That half the people there wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about. And it's not because those aren't important. It's just that's not part of the conversation for them, because that's just not part of their conversation. It's never come up, and they
Well,
don't.
it turns out I can tell you a cross section of 10,671 that have sort of opted in. 21% don't know what safety tools are. 23 say they're super important. 6% don't use them. So that's the people who are opposed to it. And then 50% say, I keep lines of communication open. And
Yep.
so, I actually do have some fun numbers there, but it's interesting, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the side things that comes out of a product like this is that you must have really interesting metrics on both based off of some of the game preferences questions that you ask, as well as the game systems that are in place. So is there any way, like, one thing I didn't notice, or I don't know if there is a way for you to know, is how do you have any sort of a metric for how often people actually do match up and play, or how many people say that they run game X and actually ever get a session of it in? Is there anything along those lines?
So we will have more of that information once we put the groups together, because those groups, the existence of those groups with meeting time will actually be that demonstration of actual connections. I've had anecdotal conversations around that, but also then diving into your questions around what are the really important things. The logistics, right, as it turns out, is more of an important thing for many people. And so we kind of handle the logistics in terms of accounting for time zone for online play. And so you can just say, show me people that match my availability, which is cool. You can say, show me people that match my gaming platform, which is cool. And show me people who want to play this game that I want to play, which is, we have, I think we're close to like 2,000, maybe even 3,000 games listed, and we keep adding more. The other really important question is, are you willing to pay for the game? Because we do partner with Start Playing for paid games. We have people that are able to register for paid GMs. And actually, I'm personally, I think, a proponent for why not pay for a game if you're trying to learn a system. That I think is a really great use of a pro. But some people are diametrically opposed to that. They don't want anything to do with that. And so that's actually a question that we're adding now, so that we can figure out, okay, well, do you want to pay for it or not? And that's a really important part of the group's function. Is it a paid or is it free? And the vast majority, I think, are going to be free. But we'll see. That's based on the distribution of pros on our platform.
So for me, the one feature that I think jumped out to me that was missing or hasn't been implemented yet, and I'm sure at some point it'll be on you guys' radar, especially as you add groups, is once you've managed to find a group of people to play with. Yeah. So that, I agree, that is definitely a challenge that you have to get over first. But then once you have that group of people and you're like, hey, okay, I think there's some compatibility here. We could all have some fun playing a game. It's actually getting those people to a table on a time, because Jim has his kids on Saturday and Sarah has her golf tournament, and so it's trying to get all these people together is often very much related to herding cats. So is there ever going to be a scheduling or here's my event RSVP type setup brought to the site?
Oh yeah. So that the groups, when they come out, will have a weekly meeting time, and so that will be one of the things that will be set. One of the things we're not implementing in the first round will be actually some additional helper logistics in terms of, okay, well, it turns out that as a group, you can all meet on these time windows, because we can see that. We know that everybody's individual availability and what that looks like. We're not doing any hard requirements, or you can't join a group where your availability isn't matched to that, because we're not expecting people to be super rigorous in terms of, okay, I just did my work schedule, I'm going to head over to RPGMatch and, update my calendar availability. It's like we try to make it very easy. And so that's actually been a request. People want, finer grain control, but with finer grain control, you hit kind of diminishing returns. So we try to make sure that we're thinking about this from available time blocks. And then one of the other pieces that's really important is how long is the game? I run super short game sessions when I run as a GM, like 2 hours in and out. And, most people are 3 to 4 hours, but, some people are, they want to play all day, and that's all good.
Yeah, one of the things I've found, so you experience it just setting up this conversation that we're having now, is I use a service called cal.com for scheduling up talks and what have you. And one of the features they have on that site that I found very, very useful is that I can link it to my Google Calendar, which is where I keep, for my personal life, most of my stuff is all in there. And so I can do that, and I can tell cal.com, okay, for conversations like this one, these are the times of days that I would generally be available as a standard template, and then it will then go and check against my existing calendar and make sure there isn't any conflicts within a certain amount of time of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a feature. I would just throw that out there to throw on whatever feature board you have going on for the future when you go to that, because I think that is incredibly useful, even if it's just for the GM or something. But
oh yeah. No, well, we have gotten that request. I think that those of us who live and die by their calendar, myself also being one of them, like, I don't know what I'm doing when I wake up until I push the button. And like, oh, okay, these are the meetings that I'm going to have today. Glad I set it all out. There's a whole group of people that don't live that way. And so I don't want to conflate the value of scheduling a tabletop game with the value of, like, a work schedule, or somebody like you who has a podcast that you're clearly diligent and rigorous with. But yeah, and those are all the things. I love having these conversations because people see it and they're like, it would be great.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's got their own story they want to link it, because everybody's got their own naggle or problem that they're looking to solve from it.
Well, and logistics is a big piece. It's a way bigger piece than I thought or knew it would be when I started. I thought it would be compatibility, but it's just like people, it turns out, are like, can you play?
Yeah, there's been a common meme and joke for years that people should, if you run a tabletop game, you should almost put it on your resume as a management thing.
Yes, totally.
But yes, logistics comes down to being probably more often the death knell of a game than anything else, is just trying to get people all together.
Well, and what I might like to do, and I'll tease this feature with you, see if this scratches that itch, would be to send a reminder email or a reminder text before the game is going to happen, with an easy opt out or verify. So sort of just saying, like, hey, you're going to be able to make the game an hour from now, or customize whatever that timeline is. Maybe it's, are you going to be able to make the game tomorrow? And then just having the person be able to decline, and then, or confirm, and then figure out what that actually looks like on the other side. Timeliness is also a question.
You're leading right to where I was going to ask, because as you brought that up, I look over at my screen, because I've got my game preferences open from my account on here, and one of the things that I see on here that I think is a very awesome question. I'd love to know what the metrics are behind it. I'm just curious to what the other 9,999 people view of this was. How late is late when it comes to showing up for a session? So if you say, hey, we're starting at 5:00, how late is late? Because I went browsing through some people's profiles recently. I was just like, I opened up all the filters and I was like, just show me who the algorithm thinks is the highest match, no matter where in the world they are. And I was looking through some of them, and there were some people on there that are like, yeah, if you're an hour late for the session, that's when it starts to become a problem. I'm like, to me, that blew my mind. I'm like, what do you mean an hour late for the session? If you're an hour late for the session, it's done.
Well, and so that's actually an example I go to in terms of when I got onto tabletop TTRPG Twitter. I was like, okay, what are the right questions? And so I started doing polls. And so the whole Twitter persona that I have is known for doing all of these polls across different things. And sometimes we'll say like, what's your favorite giant, fire giant, frost giant, whatever. But then the other question, the ones I really wanted to know about was, I asked a question. I said, how important is it to show up on time to a tabletop session? And when you ask it that way, 90% of people say it's really important. And I was like, what? I've been to way too many games to believe this is true. So I was like, let me change the way I asked that. I said, how late is late? And that's the question that you see. And the distribution is actually really interesting. It's like 10% say 5 minutes is late. It's more like, 40% say 15 minutes, 40% say half an hour. And then there's another like 10% that say, an hour is okay. But that's when we get back into the matching, which we've taken a step back from, we will definitely make sure that is something that is more heavily weighed. Because honestly, if you say 5 minutes is late and someone shows up an hour late, that's a waste of time.
Yeah, exactly. I hope you, as time goes on and more data comes in, I hope you guys are able to do like a yearly, almost like stat dump of like, here's some interesting things, like, just that distribution that you just mentioned for how late is late. Because you're in a very unique position to be able to see that, to where some people might get a vibe of that from just general, but being able to see it from a metric standpoint would be really, really interesting.
Yeah, and also one of the other things that would be really fun, and yes, I will, absolutely. And then there's also the cross correlation. Like, does VTT correlate with lateness? Does a in-person table, is that different? If people have an affinity for a certain publisher, are they the late ones? Whatever those things are, I'm actually super curious to see.
Yeah. I noticed that on there you've got the VTT and you've got a partnership with a few of them.
Yes.
Has there been a and I noticed that I'm not sure how long ago it was, but I think at the beginning when I first looked at it, you didn't have an option for just like, I only play at a table, and then that eventually showed up.
Mm-hmm.
But what have you found has been the distribution? I would assume, and this is my guess, you tell me if I'm way off base.
Yeah.
That as far as the VTTs go, I would say the ranking is probably Roll20, Foundry, then Fantasy Grounds. But I would wager that probably I play at a table is probably right below Roll20 as far as an online website goes.
It's almost like you're looking at my screen right now. Actually, the number one gaming platform, and you could say, well, that's not really a gaming platform, but it is number one, is Discord.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's like 5,000. Then Roll20 is at 4,000. A table is at 3,000. Foundry is at 2,000. And then after that, Owlbear Rodeo and Fantasy Grounds are actually pretty close. But that's one of those things where, part of that also has to do with, yes, how widely is the platform distributed, but also there's an opportunity for these VTTs to essentially promote RPGMatch. And so the engagement also drives that. We've seen that mostly on the publisher side of things. Our most engaged publisher really has been Free League, who's been fantastic. And Modifius has been great. We've got, we've seen engagement with Chaosium, with Renegade Games, with a bunch of other places. But the more engaged the partner is, the more anonymized information we can share about, what's happening for them. So since launching the custom avatar, I just saw this, on the dashboard. I didn't even know this was had been integrated by the team. We've got 1,098 people who have customized their avatar, and it was only launched a couple weeks ago. So there's only 45 people by comparison that are doing a custom bio. But that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the publishers that you're working with. Part of the reason, besides the fact that you and I are going to have this conversation, but whenever I jump back onto the site to go look through things, I just started looking through Dragonbane from Free League,
I love
which is a really, really interesting game. I have to have more conversations about that at another time, but I'm really liking what I see on it. I just got Foundry all set up with it here today, actually, to do some solo stuff. But
Well, total sidebar. I actually have played the original version in
the Swedish
Swedish.
version?
Yeah, and I'm not Swedish, but we call it Swedish D&D, and I had a friend who was Swedish who had the books, and they were all in Swedish, and so he's like, "Yeah, go ahead and look at the Dungeon Master's Guide. You have no idea what it says."
there's no rule lawyering there, and you can't go and look at the monster manual.
No, he was like, "Yeah, that's not how it works." You're like, okay.
I have to take your word for it because I can't see it. I can't read it.
Yeah, well, now I have the English version. So the thing that I like is that parrying rule. That one's really interesting. The other thing I love about it is the classes, the diversity. You can be like a merchant, and why not?
Yep.
That's a fun grouping. I think there's a whole bunch of diversity in classes that I prefer to sort of the de facto, wizard, rogue.
Yeah, one of the things I'm liking, like one of the things that popped out to me about that game, just from my first read through and getting ready to play solo, is how the advancement of skills work in terms of if you roll a critical success or critical failure, it marks it, and then at the end of your game session, you can try to improve that skill because you managed to get a critical success or failure on it.
Yeah.
So I really dig the whole, as you use a skill, you get better at it, and it's been something that I've been trying to figure out how to homebrew into. I generally play more like BX based games is where I spend most of my time, and I've tried to think of how I could implement something along those lines of, the more you use something, the more you do it. And I thought this whole if you get a critical success or critical failure, it tags it idea was really, really interesting. I still don't know how I would ever port it back, but I like the fact that they're doing it in this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you look through that though, has there been? I have to imagine that as you're adding all these games in, because how many games did you say you're up to now on the site that people can choose from?
Oh my goodness, it's thousands. It's thousands.
Has there been any game where you're like, you had never heard of this game, and then like have you personally been able to find games that you never heard of before just by adding them to the site or seeing them pop up in the metrics? Like,
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I believe we probably have the most comprehensive game list of anything out there, because we started with sort of jumping off from everything that was listed in Wikipedia, and so that was fun. And so also we're listing games that are out of print, because people can still play them. If you want to play Boot Hill, from TSR, great. That no problem. I mean, part of it also is, there are indie game creators. Anytime an indie game, wants to be listed on there, I'm like, let's do it. Why not? But it's been great. We've had requests, especially in the beginning, to say like, okay, well, you don't have this or that. There are a couple really cool ones. Steam Forged, that's going to be kicking off, an agreement with RPGMatch that I'm excited about. They have a really cute game called Animal. Oh goodness, I'm gonna look. Animal Adventures, which is you get to play as like a dog or a cat, and so it's great family friendly games. There's also another one called Mouse Guard, which is I'm
all about Mouse Guard. I've got that right over here beside me.
Yeah, so those are pretty cool. We've been working with R. Talasaurian, so there's The Witcher and Cyberpunk. I'm a big fan of Fallout, the video game and genre and all of that, and so having the 2D20 Modifius version of that has been great. That actually was my initial exposure to the state of the art and looking for a game, because I reached out to, and now we have a great relationship with Modifius, but their social media person, April, who's fantastic, and I asked before I knew her. I was like, hey, how do I find people to play Fallout with? And she was like, well, you can hop on the Discord and go into the Fallout looking for game channel. And I was like, cool, but I don't know anything about these people. It's like shouting into the void, and it's pretty wild that's how we're putting games together, because I mean, it's like we're going to spend 4 hours every week for like the rest of our lives together. I mean, that's a big commitment. And if you sort of get it like almost right, that's almost worse than if it's like a car crash, right? Because you're sort of like, I guess it's okay. And there are a lot of people who feel that way about their game. Like they've played a game that was amazing and life-changing. Now they're just sort of slumming it with, like the people they happen to, meet and they're at work or whatever. And so it's the comparison with relationships is unavoidable. I'm a big proponent of marriage. I've been married for 23 years, so I'm not saying you should get a mistress. But there's nothing wrong with a little side game. That's it's
You gotta have your work wife and your home wife.
Right. Well, and honestly, the other really big challenge, and this is a challenge for independent game producers, is part of the reason that to the victor goes the spoils for Hasbro, is like I had this epiphany. I realized, let's say you have a gaming group of 5 people, right? And they've been playing together for, years or months or whatever it is. And somebody in the group is like, hey, I'd like to play something else. And so person 1 says, let's play something else. Person 2, 3, and 4 say, yeah, let's do it. And then number 5 says, nah, I just want to play D&D 5e. What are you going to do? Are you going to say, Bob, don't come for the next 6 months because we're going to play, Fallout? No, you're just going to play 5e. And so I think that really for people who are looking to explore other tabletop games, they might have a game, but wouldn't it be cool if they could find a group of people that are interested in playing a new game? And that's actually, if you look at the people who have registered, almost, I mean, D&D 5e is obviously the biggest one, or maybe not obviously, but it's 4,000 of the 10,000. But there's 3,700 people who say they will play anything.
I was actually going to ask you because I think it's obvious almost anybody that on a site like this 5e would be the big dog in terms of what everybody is saying they're willing to play.
Mm-hmm.
But who's the lonely unmatched game out there? What game is sitting out there going, won't anybody play me? That maybe one person has on there.
Oh, you want like the low?
Yeah, who's the poor soul that we
all the way to the bottom? It's going to take.
Who can somebody that's listening to this podcast right now hear the game that you're about to say and say, oh, I'd play that, and go and put it on there so that person can find a match?
Year of the Phoenix.
Fear of the Phoenix.
Yeah.
I've never heard of the game.
Or Tenchi Muyo, Rapture, The Second Coming, Lighthearted, Ex Machina. And these are like one person. Brave Zenith. Ever heard of that one?
Nope.
Swordbearer. It's funny though, like once Commando, that's another one. But then you get to like another, new edition that came from Beneath the Sea, and there's 2 people. So the challenge is really the lonely person who wants to play Year of the Phoenix, World Tree, Victorian Gothic. I mean, we have thousands of games, so there's a lot of people who are looking for some edge.
I think that's another spot where you guys can, once you have enough of a group of people together, where you can almost do like hey, did you ever think of trying this game? And if so, as soon as you add it, here's a bunch of new matches for it. Now, whether or not you wrap that in with having partnerships with the publishers, or just using your own metrics, but I think there's you hear it often from indie developers where they get frustrated because people only want to play 5e, and whether that's a scenario like what you were just describing, where 4 of the 5 people at the table will be fine switching, but the 5th person doesn't, or if it's a case of just lack of exposure or what have you. But I think there'd be an interesting way of having something where, like, hey, if your machine learning is able to say, oh, look, Kevin enjoys these 5 games. Hey, let me ping up and say, hey, Kevin, have you ever thought of trying to play this game? I've got 6 people that are looking for it. And then, maybe that changes my plans for that weekend type idea, or at least gets me to go look into that game.
Yeah, 100%. I'll send you right now. I'll put it in the chat so you can see the latest. Can I send an image? This is sort of unfair, right, for the listeners.
No,
Neither
it's
of
our
them mind, everybody.
yeah.
Imagine a graph.
I cannot see said graph either. So it's a theater of the mind for me as well.
Yeah, let me show you. So now you can see.
Oh, there we go.
D&D 5e, I'll play anything. Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder, Alien, D&D 3.5, Vampire, The One Ring, Star Wars role-playing game, Blades in the Dark, Cyberpunk Red. But you can see, like, I mean, we literally
that long tail goes down real quick, eh?
long tail. It does. Although even when you get down to, like, how many people do you need? 130?
Yep.
You really don't need that many to play a game. So if you want to play Godlike or Battle Lords of the 23rd Century or City of Heroes, you got 20 people on there that are interested in playing.
Do you find is this being more attractive to players or DMs?
So the secret is that
I know you don't particularly call out which one. You ask the general question of how many games have you DM'd, but
yeah.
has there been a feel of like this is more popular for DMs trying to find people to come to them, or is it people trying to find the table that they want to join into?
It's a pretty good mix, but the secret reality, and I think the core is that the audience that drives all of the purchases in this industry, it's the game masters, right? And so that's the core, and it's, how do you set a table, how do you find people to play with, but game masters are players too. So
or often they would like to be if they could find a group of people who would be willing to run it for them. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, how often have you heard being the forever DM bemoaned? But the trouble is, like, I'm a forever DM too, right? And it's not like I want to be, and I have played in games in the past, but it's just one of those things where it's like the Hunger Games. You end up volunteering as tribute this way too often.
So what's been the biggest success story of this, or the biggest email that you've gotten from somebody that you've been like, okay, I'm onto something here. This is going to work out because stories like this is what I was aiming for, and it's a come about.
So I have gotten the individual emails saying, like, hey, I met somebody. It's awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. I mean, really, the story though is that we're not advertising and it keeps growing. I shouldn't say that. We are advertising on RPGNet. One of the stories, and this is a little bit of a twist from what you asked for, because I think you're like, hey, what's the anecdotal? Like, I found the game, I had never been able to play.
Yeah, I found my wife on RPG Tinder.
Yeah. Well, as long as they both opt into it, right? But the thing that we do that makes that less likely is we're not in people's messages, right? It's safety first and privacy second. So there's a lot of things we can't see. We can see when people are being blocked, and that's what we look for bad actors, which actually is remarkably low up until this point. But we can see when people are being blocked, but we're not reading the contents of the message. So when you say, like, well, hey, how many games have been organized? I can't tell because I'm not reading their DMs, and it's sort of a private conversation. So literally, I don't know. We will know with groups, and that's exciting. But the biggest one was really when I reached out to RPGNet to talk about some metadata, because that's originally the opener was. I said, hey, I'd love to know if you guys have a game list or metadata that we can use to help people find things, and we're still going to be integrating that. But the person who was running RPGNet at the time said, yeah, let's talk, and then eventually got to a place where he was like, do you want to just take this over? And I was like, what? And so the whole time he was sort of, evaluating, was I really in it for the right reasons?
You were in a job interview and didn't know it.
I didn't know it. And so that was a really kind of awesome transition. And authentically, I just want to help people match. I figure there will be a commercial model, at some point in the future. We have seed investors who also believe that. And it's, 5% of people converting at $20 per year. That seems pretty reasonable. And so that's going to also enable us to essentially power a nexus for tabletop role playing, because name the social media platform out there that from the ground up is about tabletop role playing. There's none.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you go and ask people from like the OSR scene, when was the high moment? It was during the Google Plus days. Google Plus had a very good story around it, and it was a community that was able to build up, and there was a lot of sharing happening. And then when Google Plus fell away, it fell away. And then there's a few different forums, RPGNet or N-World or what have you, that have managed to stay around for a long period of time. But there's so much more and more content and information and just discussion that gets locked behind places like Discord, where Discord is an amazing tool. I use it as well. But in 10 years, there's no way to search that. There's no way to find any of that information for somebody who wasn't already part of that Discord group. So having those sorts of places is really good.
Well, and that's a huge part of the value of the forum is
exactly.
It's discoverable. And so, so much has been locked into Discord. And so the forum, though, is a place that has, the RPGNet forum has, well, it's not just the forum, that the website has, 250,000 pages of content. I mean, it's the longest of long tail. And what we're doing on RPGNet, we have an explore feed, which is basically powered by our partners. It's a curated list of tabletop folk. And we pull all of their stuff automatically from Twitter. And we're in the process of going through and building out the functionality so you can retweet and comment and like and post. But the other thing that we can do is take some of that content that's locked away in the forum and start moving that into this conversation in sort of a more modern way of viewing it. So that's really exciting to be able to look at that, to be able to create landing pages for games. So we have landing pages for all the games that we have. We're adding, custom headers. We're talking with the publishers, so that's an entry point for people. We're talking with VTT platforms so that they can actually say, hey, this is the way to play online, because we're not a VTT. We're never going to be. We're not an e-commerce facilitator, right, in terms of, professional GMs, because that's its own model, right? As soon as you're about paid games, you can't be about free games. And so we're absolutely seeding all of that to start playing, and we're facilitating that. But what we can be is the place where you say, this is what I'm about. As a tabletop role player, this is my tabletop identity, across all of the games that I like.
If you had to pick a product, whether it be, I know we've likened this a lot because there's the obvious comparisons between things like a dating site, but if we were to move away from the dating site comparison, especially with the larger vision you have with integrating now with RPGNet and all of its content and the legacy that's behind that, is there a site or a product that you think you can be like, this is kind of roughly, because almost what you're describing to me in a way almost sounded like, and I know you said not e-commerce, and this has an e-commerce side to it, but almost sounded like Steam, where everybody by default goes to Steam to go and see a review on a game, to see how a game's doing, to go and learn about new games that are coming out. So it almost sounded like something like that. But is there a product like that where you're kind of, when you're envisioning it, you're like, I would like us to be this of RPGs?
Totally. LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, imagine a LinkedIn that was all about tabletop role-playing games. You got your feed there. You could go deeper. You had your profile. You could be endorsed for, cool voices or, costumes or, whatever. But that's probably the thing that crosses the threshold of what this could be in terms of communication, and everything else.
Okay, that's a really good elevator pitch right there. Is the LinkedIn of tabletop role playing games? I like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's a question that, as you talk about this with myself or with anybody else that you're going out to describe this to, or just talk about in general, that doesn't usually come up in the questions that you'd like to be able to put out there? So what's something that I haven't asked you yet, or that we haven't talked about, that would be, you think, important to get out into the ears of people, or just interesting to get out into the ears of people if they're considering something like this?
The closer question.
Yep.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of the general conversations. It's interesting because people ask me, or they're curious about my motivation. Like, why are you really doing this? And in the reason really is out there, and it's sort of frivolous, but like, I want to find my perfect gaming table. And I know if I can get 10 million people to sign up, then I know I can find like those amazing people that it's just going to be magic. Because I don't know if you've ever had a table, like some people have, and some people haven't had a table that's just like, it's like magical, right? It's this incredible GM. And, I mean, I was fortunate enough to go to D&D in a castle, and I got to play in a moment there. And it was like 3 days of consecutive gaming all around this character concept that I'd been wanting to play for like, 5 years. And it was a beautiful thing. And so that's really what I'm after for myself, selfishly, but also for the hobby, just to be able to facilitate that and to help people to have that incredible gaming experience, so they can be so elevated. It's just like, it can be magic. I mean, have you had a magical tabletop gaming experience before?
Yeah, and for me, it was actually going to be something I brought up a moment ago. Is I wonder how much the matching, because I don't know how your match score works exactly, but for me, some of the best tables I've been at is where everybody's very different. Like the table, like I wouldn't want to play at a table where everybody plays like I do. To a certain extent, I want there to be a baseline, yes, but of course, same as your friends group, the friends all have different personalities and different quirks, right? And it's kind of the same thing at the gaming table. And what's really cool I've found is whenever I'm at a table where one person's is able to almost hand a baton off to somebody else for an item that they dig and they get into, that makes everything a little bit better. But yeah, the tables that I've been in have often not been the ones I thought were going to be the super amazing tables. They're more generally end up being more of it wasn't something that was crafted, it was something that was stumbled into. And yeah, it's like catching lightning or a magic in a bottle when you're able to get that. So if this is able to help other people stumble into those, I think it's going to be pretty awesome.
Well, I think just kind of building on that in terms of the to get the right diversity is to also be aligned around the right things, right? And so if you can say like, okay, let's find somebody who's a note taker, let's find somebody who's the who
wants to be the mapper, who wants to be the mapper, whatever those things are. But I don't think you want diversity in showing up on time, right? No, but I think there's things like the cool sliders that you have on here of like, who's more into role playing, who's more into combat, things like that. There's might be a group of people at the table that are definitely, they're going to be the faces, they're going to be the ones doing the funny voices, and then there's other folks that are keeping the combat and they're keeping the tactical side of the game alive for it. And so I think it's that mix. I agree completely though. Yeah, if you're, I will put down as from the Red Caps perspective, if you're showing up an hour late to the game, we're not the right table for you. That still blew my mind that there's people that think that's an acceptable time limit. Sorry, that stuck with me.
Get ready for the angry tweets.
Yes, send them all my way. If you are an hour late, you'll probably be 3 days late with the tweet. I won't even see it anyway. But An hour late for a game's way too long. But
that is clearly the hill you were dying.
yeah, that's. I'll play any game system you want. You just be there on time. Just be there on time. It's not that hard. All right. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking, and more so, I appreciate that you're trying to make a tool that can potentially really help a lot of people and bring a lot of groups together. And I hope everybody who's listening has a moment. It doesn't take very long to go through and sign up. It's pretty easy sign up. And like I said, I used it just for kind of exploring and seeing other places around. And besides the crazy stat I just mentioned, there was a bunch of people that had games I hadn't heard of, just looking through profiles, which is a neat exercise as well. So yeah, I highly encourage everybody to go over and where should they go to do this sign up and find out more information?
So just as of the recording of this, we have a new URL, a new home. I'm very excited to announce it is now match.rpg.net.
Excellent. So previously, if you had seen previous links, it would have been RPGMatch. Was it .net or .com?
So RPGnet. Excuse me. So many RPGs.
Yeah, now you're getting yourself goofed.
All the RPGs. It was rpgmatch.org. That is where you can find out more information. If you go to rpgmatch.com, that's fine. You'll get redirected to it. But the app itself, and so that's if you want to learn more. If you're like, no, I don't want to dive in, I don't want to create an account, you can go to rpgmatch.com or .org and you'll end up in the right place. But if you want to go straight to the app, it's match.rpg.net.
Excellent. And for folks who are already on rpg.net, is the logins already all synced up for them, or is it a separate login?
All the redirects are there, all of the profiles, share out, all of the email, all of that stuff. The only thing that's going to be a bit of a drag is if you have.
Okay, for anybody who's listening, we just lost your audio. I'm going to keep talking while you go. You feel free to jump back in. I believe you were saying that the profile and everything is there, but there's might be a couple of things that they have to bring over from the RPG.net account.
Yeah, if you've got your login set up, and if you're saving your password in your browser, then you got to be sure that you put that in on the new domain.
Right. All right, awesome. So there's probably tons of people that have easy access to this that don't even know it exists yet. So hopefully everybody jumps over and revisits the forums. Get out of social media, go read an old classic forum because they're better. And while you're there, swing in and set up a profile. Joaquin, thank you very much for coming on and talking with me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Red Caps podcast. I hope you enjoyed, you learned something, and that you are eager to come back for more. www.theredcaps.net has all the links to all the ways to contact me, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you very so much for listening, and as always, never let your cap dry out. Stay safe, have fun. We'll talk again soon. Take care.